What's going on, everybody? This is Sean of Raw Select Music. Today I want to talk about this record right here. This is Mansur Brown, Shiroi, released on Black Focus Records, which is Henry Wu / Kamaal Williams' label. This was a record that sort of dropped out of nowhere for me. Like, I had already known that Mansur Brown, I'm really bad with names, folks, had already collaborated with Kamaal Williams on The Return, and I thought his solo that he did for one of the later tracks on that album was actually one of the highlight tracks. And I'd also seen that Kamaal Williams had posted a sneak peek teaser video on his Instagram talking about Mansur Brown, so I was really curious to check this record out. In fact, it was one of the records towards the end of the year that I was really curious to hear. And now that I've given it a listen, I wanted to share my thoughts and opinions of this record with you and let you know whether or not I think it's worth checking out. So with that little introduction out of the way, let's talk about this guy. So I can't really say much in terms of background information about Mansur Brown, other than I know he's really young. Pretty sure he's in his very early 20s, and he's become something of a prodigy as a guitarist. And it seems like on this record, the primary focus is on his guitar playing. Much like Square Pusher and his bass playing was a primary focus for a lot of his productions, Mansur Brown puts a lot of his guitar soloing up front and center. It also seems like a lot of his songs are based around different sort of manipulations, either through audio or in the way that he plays, make up the majority of the sounds on here, as well as the use of some live instrumentation, as well as some electronic instruments. And the overall sound is very cool. I really like a lot of what Mansur Brown's trying to do with this. There's an overall vibe to this record that really comes off as sort of like a garage band project, and not in the Apple products garage band sort of sense. I mean, like, literally this was recorded in somebody's garage. And in that sense, it sort of gives the record a little bit of sort of like a punk rock sound. Nothing on here feels really polished. Everything feels pretty dirty, feels experimental, and feels sort of like a musician sort of recording music for the first time. And in that regard, this record's actually pretty exciting, because it really feels like Mansur Brown is taking a sort of limited framework, be it mostly using guitar, bass, a few electronic sounds, and some electronic drums, and what does sound like a little bit of live drumming as well. And I also have to say, I think that is probably my #1 biggest fault with this record, is I feel like it does have a little bit of sameness to it. And that's not from a lack of trying, because honestly, Mansur Brown is really going for a lot of different vibes on this. Throughout the course of this record, you'll hear a pretty wide spanning mix of electronic music, funk, soul, jazz. I even heard little bits of IDM in this record, specifically with one of the tracks on the B-side, really gave off the vibe of some vintage Autechre, and I really love that moment on here. But I feel like due to the production and sort of the limited palette of instrumentation that he's using on this, the record does end up ultimately becoming a little bit samey. I feel like this record could have benefited quite a bit from some collaboration. I know that Kamaal Williams and David Wu do show up on this record, but I do feel like either due to the recording quality of this record or just the way that his contribution was implemented into this record, it sort of gets lost in the mix. Like I said, while I do really like the overall aesthetic of the not overproduced sound of this record, it does ultimately end up becoming a little bit on the muddy side. I feel like the mid-range on this record really gets the most favor on this record, instead of getting the full spectrum of bass, mid, and treble, which is generally like the ideal for any sort of recorded music. That being said, I know I feel like I've been overly critical on this record. I do want to say that I still really enjoy it. The grooves on here are really tight. Mansur Brown needs to be commended as a skilled musician, because some of the bass lines on here are some of the best that I've heard, similarly to a lot of like Square Pusher's music. I feel like the bass playing on here, or the bass by way of guitar playing on here, needs to be commended, because there is some top-notch musicianship on here. And I feel like Mansur Brown's guitar soloing on here is actually really expressive. There are quite a few moments on this record that I feel like really, his guitar playing really does add to the song. And I do like the fact that he plays around in multiple genres. There's one song at the end of the record called Hand Hide, which is one of the best sort of a non-trap artist exploring trap music I think I've ever heard. Or the other song on here, which I think was Flip Up, really gives off this really cool IDM vibe to it. Gives off this old school IDM vibe that I'm really attracted to. Plus, I really like the first half of the record. It's littered with some really solid tracks like Shiroi and Back South are two really standout tracks where I should think the Mansur electronic music meets sort of jazz funk meets hip hop all sort of being mixed together into a sound that pretty much can only be described as Mansur Brown's sound really comes together, and I feel like it really works. Overall, I feel like Mansur Brown is gonna be an artist to watch for. He really seems to be carving out his own sound, which I think is absolutely commendable, especially for an artist of his relative young age. And I really feel like his music is only just gonna get better as he releases more material. Overall, I feel like this is a really promising record. There are a few moments on here where I do feel like it does get a little bit samey, but I still find myself enjoying this guy, and I definitely give it a pretty high recommendation. If you haven't checked this one out, I definitely give this one a listen. If you listened to the Kamaal Williams record last year, The Return, you're probably gonna like this one too. This one leads a little bit more on the electronic music end of the spectrum compared to the more jazzy sounds of Kamaal Williams, but I find myself really liking this guy, and I definitely think if you like that sort of sound, you're probably gonna find yourself liking this record too. So yeah, Mansur Brown, Shiroi, a record worth checking out. So that's gonna be it for me today, guys. Thanks as always for watching. If you've listened to this record, let me know what you thought about it down in the comments. If you want to hear it for yourself, please head over to my WordPress or Steemit blog, because that's where I post audio links so you can check out records such as these for yourself. Also, make sure that you head over to my Mixcloud so you can check out Raw Select Radio, which is basically the audio component to this whole Raw Select music thing. You can hear records like the Mansur Brown, as well as a whole host of other records that I think are worth checking out. Links for that, as always, are in the description. That's gonna be it for me today, guys. Thanks as always for watching, and I will catch you in the next video. Until then, peace out!